Hello everyone, I'm Aseem Jakar, founder Exploity, and today we have with us Phillip Wylie, ex-IoT Security Evangelist at Phosphorus Cybersecurity. Welcome, Phillip, to ISMG Studio.
Thank you.
All right, so let's start with your perspective of what makes securing IoT environments uniquely challenging compared to traditional IT systems.
Yes, it's twofold. One of the, like your OT systems, industrial controls, has been traditionally one of these things, keep your hands off, it's so easy to break. They're using old, outdated firmwares, and sometimes if you update it, it's going to break it. They've had bad experiences with that. Traditionally, they've been managed by folks that weren't even in IT. They weren't really technical. They were just working maintenance people in a manufacturing plant. And now it's kind of improving because some of that's starting to fall under the responsibilities of IT and cybersecurity, so it's kind of improving there. With IoT, people are just really not really thinking that it's a risk. And interesting thing is, I come from a pen testing background. One of the things we always do is check for printers. We look on the network, scan for printers, see if we can find any kind of default credentials. Can we get credentials from those printers? And it's starting to work that way where threat actors are doing more of that. Like recently, the Akira ransomware gang couldn't get a foothold because the endpoint detection systems was preventing them from getting a foothold. So they exploited a camera, loaded malware on it, and they were able to do an SMB share to the network. And of course, IT and cybersecurity, they're not thinking this is a risk. This is one of our devices. So, should be trusted, but it was able to get a foothold that way. And it's getting more difficult for threat actors, so they're spreading more to IoT environments.
You mentioned OT environments. Typically, historically, what has happened was that they were kept in air-gapped environments. So, do you think that added to people not looking at security for these systems, critical systems?
Yeah, I think so, because they thought air gapping was enough, but then you had shadow IT where they're working on this stuff and they want to make it easier. Maybe they put a Wi-Fi router in there, or they connect to the network, or they put a jump box in, and it's not secure, and so they just take for granted it's air gapped, it's safe. And so, yeah, I think that's definitely been a major issue.
Yeah. Now, given your background with helping organizations find vulnerabilities, doing penetration testing, where do you see the biggest gaps today in how companies are handling IoT security?
A lot of it's kind of basic hygiene, things that we were really having to address 10 years ago, that you still see the issues from time to time, but default credentials, you see that a lot on these devices, weak passwords, not changing out the passwords periodically, not doing updates, not having a good asset inventory, because if you don't have a good asset inventory, you can't protect or assess what you don't know.
So do you think that asset discovery is the first step in identifying what devices we have, and then the next is
because back to that, you have to know what you have before you can assess it or protect it. So yeah, asset inventory is good. Definitely, and that's one of the things that's been an issue across all different types of technologies. I worked for a global consumer product company, and one year we had to have a bunch of web app pen tests done, and they didn't even know all the URLs for that. So much like that, IoT and OT is the same way. They don't know everything they got,
If you were advising a security team starting to build or mature their IoT security program, what would be the top priorities or the first steps that you would recommend this team?
Yeah, I would say first thing would be asset inventory, get a collection of all the devices that you have, and then basic hygiene stuff. Like one of the first things they're going to do after that is look for any default credentials, change those. And also one of the things you want to rotate those and change passwords periodically, because what happens is a lot of threat actors, as endpoint detection systems get harder to bypass, they're more dependent on credentials or social engineering. So you want to routinely be changing those passwords, because maybe one of the passwords you use may not be someone in your organization, but maybe it's a common password, but it's part of one of these data breaches. And threat actors will use these in their dictionaries and different files they use for brute forcing passwords. So that would be one of the first steps, changing default credentials, just your basic hygiene stuff. Even we mentioned air gapping, so network segmentation is a good thing to do. If it's like an IoT device, firmware is usually not as risky to update. OT may be a little more complicated. And then it's looking for any kind of vulnerabilities and making sure that they're patched. Because I know there's been versions of webcams or security cameras that had hard-coded credentials that could be changed. The only way to change is from firmware updates.
So looking ahead, how do you see offensive security techniques like red teaming evolving to better address the growing attack surface of IoT within the enterprises?
Yeah, so one of the things that people are having to do, the pen testers, just like the threat actors, is doing things like password spraying and leveraging social engineering. I think a lot of companies don't leverage social engineering enough. They have these different tools which are really great for security awareness. They send out an email and it kind of monitors who clicks, and you have to go back and take more security awareness training, but they don't know what really happens if someone clicks on it. So if they're sent malware or ransomware, someone clicks on it, they don't know what happens. So I think it's good to make sure you're using some kind of payload in your phishing emails. And then even if no one clicks on it, then you should go a step further and execute a pen test from an endpoint, a standard user setup, and execute the malware and see what can happen beyond that point.
You see these common problems across different technologies, and over the years, things like weak passwords, default credentials. What is it, according to you, that the vendors or the manufacturers are not able to learn from the past? Like, why is it repeating?
I think with some of these technologies, it's just security was an afterthought, and IoT and OT, they thought we have nothing to worry about, but it's become a big risk, especially when you talk about OT and your critical infrastructure. I forget how long ago someone attacked a water treatment facility in Florida. Some of these type of ways are really good ways to affect a large population. I mean, that's more easier for someone to pull off in some cases than a kinetic attack where you're actually physically attacking a facility. You poison a water treatment facility, people don't know until it's too late. If you take out a power grid, then even access to food, you take some densely populated area like San Francisco, the power grid went down, how long is the food going to last in the refrigerators and stuff? So there's a lot of things outside of just the typical personal attacks on people. There's all sorts of ways. So with critical infrastructure being a big target, and it just makes it easier for nation states to attack other nations when you can do it across the internet, using technologies to change their IPs, like proxy servers, changing IPs. It's hard for someone to know exactly where the source is coming from. So it makes it a lot easier, lower risk attack for threat actors.
So let's say if you're running the security program for a device manufacturer, what are the top 3 things that you would prioritize in your product development life cycle?
Sure. One of the things I would put into the mix is make sure that they're testing the products, performing pen tests, because in the past there's been organizations that test products. Maybe you're a manufacturer, you have a router or switch, or some other type of device, you send it to one of these third-party labs and they test it. So it's either you test it, I would at least test it in-house if you're not going to have a third party to test it, and routinely test that. Every time you make an update, just the same way you should with applications, you should do a test on it periodically, make sure and getting these different updates out to your customers as soon as you can, keeping them on the loop when any type of exploits come out, and then just kind of really monitoring threat intelligence out there and monitoring the news to see what's happening and try to stay a step ahead of it. Because a lot of these things that affect these devices too are some of these lightweight web servers like BusyBox. Because a lot of these things are all web enabled. You connect it may be a lightweight operating system, but they're using like some lightweight web server to connect to it. So making sure these are being updated. If you're using these third party or open source products, make sure you're keeping up with those and patching those.
Thank you so much. We were speaking with Phillip Wylie from Phosphorus Cybersecurity. This is Aseem Jhakar signing off from my SMG studio.